The hum of announcements and the rolling sound of luggage wheels echoed through the bright corridors of Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja. Inside the VIP terminal, everything felt polished and calm, separated from the crowd and noise of the main departure hall. Men in fitted suits checked their wristwatches, personal assistants followed behind with files in hand, and private drivers waited near tinted glass doors outside. Lawrence Fidelis stepped out of the VIP lounge, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression sharp but distant. His navy blue suit was perfectly tailored, his tie slightly loosened at the collar. "Yes, I've seen the documents," he said, his tone calm but clipped. "Tell the Japan team we'll sign after the briefing. No delays." He ended the call, slipped the phone into his coat pocket, and walked briskly toward Gate 6A where his team was waiting. His pace was steady, focused, until something made him stop mid-step. A flash of green caught his eye in the crowd. His gaze locked on a woman a few feet ahead, kneeling to adjust the backpack of a small child. Her soft, dark hair shimmered under the airport lights. She stood up, and his breath caught in his throat. Faith Raymond. Time didn't just slow, it folded. She hadn't changed much. Maybe a little slimmer, maybe a bit tired around the eyes. But it was still her, the same woman whose laughter once filled his apartment. The same woman he once imagined building forever with. And she wasn't alone. Two little girls stood beside her, no more than 3 or 4 years old, dressed in matching blue floral sundresses and carrying strawberry pink backpacks. One giggled at something her sister whispered. Their joy was so natural, so radiant, that it tugged at something deep inside him. Then one of the girls turned, and Lawrence's world froze. She had his eyes, not just the color, a rare grayish brown, but the exact shape, the faint tilt when she smiled. The resemblance was undeniable, impossible. She looked at him curiously, as though sensing something, then turned back toward her mother. Faith looked up. Their eyes met for a single heartbeat. Neither of them moved. Lawrence's lips parted, but no words came out. He took one hesitant step forward, his movements unplanned, while Faith's hand instinctively reached for her daughter's, pulling them closer, one on each side. Then she turned sharply and walked away without a word, without even glancing back. Her stride was quick, deliberate. The girls followed, unaware of the storm that moment had stirred. Lawrence stood frozen. The people around him shifted and passed by. Travelers boarding flights, calling attendants, hugging relatives. But everything felt like distant noise. His chest ached, and his breath grew shallow. She had children, twins, and one of them had his eyes. He tried to reason with himself. It could be coincidence, just a trick of light. But no. Deep down, he knew. He felt it in the part of his heart that had never stopped hurting. Faith! The name crashed through him like a wave. He hadn't said it aloud in years. Not since she vanished without a word, without an explanation. But she hadn't vanished. She had simply stepped out of his world. And now, here she was, with 2 little girls who looked exactly like him. His assistant appeared beside him, confused. "Sir, the boardroom is ready. They're waiting for your final approval for the presentation." "I need a minute," Lawrence said, his gaze still fixed on the spot where Faith had been. "But sir..." "Reschedule the meeting," he said quietly, but firmly. The assistant hesitated, then stepped back, phone in hand. Lawrence stood there alone, staring into the distance, thoughts racing, his heartbeat unsteady. What happened? Why had she left? Why hadn't she told him? He closed his eyes, and all he could see was her face, the same soft smile, and the tiny, perfect face of the child with his eyes. And just like that, the past began to unravel inside him, memory after memory flooding back like a rising tide. 4 years earlier, nothing about Faith's life had ever been golden, until Lawrence Fidelis saw her. She was the maid in his mother's mansion, the quiet one who rose before dawn to sweep the marbled corridors, polish silver trays, and serve breakfast with her eyes lowered. Her uniforms were worn thin at the edges, her shoes cracked, her palms calloused from scrubbing floors that gleamed brighter than her own future ever seemed to. He was the heir to Fidelis Group, the kind of man newspapers called the next big thing. Born into boardrooms and raised around billionaire decisions, Lawrence had the world at his feet. She had barely enough to stand on. Yet somewhere between her morning greetings and his late-night returns, something unexplainable bloomed. It began with a smile she tried to hide, a kindness he didn't have to show. He noticed the way she hummed hymns under her breath while mopping, how her laughter carried a warmth that didn't belong to that cold house. And one rainy evening, when she slipped while carrying tea and the tray crashed to the floor, he didn't scold her like his mother expected. He knelt beside her, helped her pick up the shards, and said softly, "Faith, are you hurt?" That was the beginning. Their worlds collided quietly, secret glances in hallways, brief conversations when no one was listening, then the stolen moments that turned into love. Lawrence found peace in her simplicity. She found safety in his presence. When he moved out of the mansion, he made sure Faith found a job at a small art supply store, and later, when she dared to dream, he encouraged her to paint again. They built their love slowly, humbly. One shared meal, one answered prayer at a time. Eventually, he took her to a quiet resort in Calabar, where the sea met the sunset. There, with trembling hands, he knelt in the sand and said, "Faith Raymond, you are my answered prayer. The one who reminds me that love doesn't need status, only sincerity. Will you marry me?" She said yes, through tears. For a moment, it felt like heaven had rewritten their story. But perfect moments don't always last. 3 weeks later, his father died suddenly, an unexpected heart attack in the middle of a company meeting. Overnight, Lawrence was thrust into leadership, the new CEO of a fragile empire. The media buzzed with headlines. The board wanted answers. Investors demanded reassurance. In the middle of the chaos, Faith waited. She gave him space, trusting that they would weather the storm together. Then she discovered she was pregnant. She placed the positive test inside a white envelope and left it carefully on his nightstand. She planned to tell him that evening, but Lawrence didn't come home. He had been locked in meetings for days, trying to calm the board's panic. "This engagement to the Maid is a liability," said his mother coldly, her voice sharp as she faced him in the conference room. "You're under scrutiny, Lawrence. The company's future is tied to your name. You can't afford distractions." "Faith is not a maid, and she has nothing to do with the company," Lawrence argued, his tone tight. "She will if this continues," their legal advisor interjected. "No background checks, no prenuptial agreement, no business ties. It's a risk, especially now." "What exactly are you implying?" Lawrence demanded, his patience thinning. "Meaning," his mother said firmly, "Marian Obeah is the daughter of our largest investor. A marriage between your families would guarantee stability, lock in capital, and silence the critics." "I love Faith," Lawrence said, his voice cracking. "Then you'll lose everything," his mother replied, eyes cold. "The board will vote you out. This isn't about love anymore, Lawrence. This is about survival." The pressure was relentless. Legal documents were drawn up overnight. His phone was replaced. Her calls and messages were rerouted. He was told it was temporary, for her protection, they said. No scandal, no questions, a clean separation. Within days, a photo of Lawrence and Marian attending a charity gala appeared online, followed by a formal engagement announcement. He had been promised it would keep Faith safe from public attention. He never saw the white envelope. Faith waited 3 days. No call, no text, nothing. Then she saw the news. Lawrence Fidelis and Marian Obeah, smiling, hand in hand, on every major platform. She stood in their apartment, the engagement ring still on her finger, one hand pressed to her stomach, and felt something inside her break. She packed a small suitcase, left the ring on the windowsill, bought a one-way bus ticket to Lagos, and disappeared. No forwarding address, no goodbye. She told herself she wouldn't cry anymore, but she didn't know the full story. Lawrence hadn't chosen wealth over love. He had been cornered, misled, and locked out of every attempt to reach her. Someone close to him, someone with power and motives, had buried every message, every letter, every chance for the truth to come out. And now, 4 years later, fate was quietly setting its plan in motion. Everything they had lost, and everything they still had a chance to reclaim, was about to collide. Nestled in a quiet part of Gwarinpa, far from Abuja's city rush and glass towers, was a small flower shop called Bloom and Canvas. It wasn't luxurious or grand, no imported roses or extravagant displays, but it carried a charm that made people linger. The air always smelled of lavender and eucalyptus, and soft instrumentals played from a tiny speaker on the shelf. Behind the wooden counter, Faith Raymond tied a ribbon around a bouquet of white lilies. A customer smiled, thanked her, and stepped out. The brass bell above the door jingled lightly as it closed. A few seconds later, 2 small voices echoed from the back room. "Mummy!" Faith turned just in time to see her daughters Ava and Leah rush into the shop. They were 4 years old, identical in features but opposite in temperament. Ava was calm and thoughtful, the quiet observer. Leah was all energy and questions and excitement. Both had inherited Faith's soft, dark hair and their father's brown, grayish eyes, though Faith never mentioned that man's name. "Did you finish your drawings?" she asked, smiling as they ran toward her. "Yes." Leah held up a paper covered in a swirl of colors. "It's a butterfly garden." Faith laughed softly, kissing her forehead. "It's beautiful." Ava tugged gently at her sleeve. "Mummy, can you read to us now?" Faith smiled and nodded. They moved to the small reading corner by the window, a cozy nook with a wooden bench and shelves filled with old storybooks. She opened a familiar book and began reading aloud, her voice calm and soothing. To anyone passing by, it looked like a picture-perfect scene, a young mother reading to her daughters on a quiet afternoon. But behind Faith's gentle smile lived a quiet ache. She had built this life from nothing, leaving Abuja's high-rise chaos and all she once knew to start fresh, to protect her girls. No tabloids, no gossip, no powerful family watching over her. Just peace. She told herself she had let go of Lawrence the day he vanished, that she didn't need closure, that she had moved on. But on nights when the girls were asleep and the city grew silent, Faith would sit by her bedroom window, staring at the stars, and she would wonder, did he ever think of her? Did he ever know? Did he ever care? She never cried aloud anymore, only in the quiet of her heart, because the pain hadn't fully gone away. A part of her still missed him, and she didn't know if that part would ever stop. Thousands of kilometers away, the Abuja skyline glittered against the night. Inside the top floor of Fidelis Innovations Tower, Lawrence sat alone in his glass office. The view stretched for miles, but he wasn't really looking at it. He was now the CEO of Fidelis Innovations, one of the country's fastest-growing tech firms. His face often appeared on magazine covers and at investment panels, but his life was silent. No warmth, no laughter, no mention of family. His penthouse in Maitama looked perfect, but it felt empty, like a hotel room no one truly lived in. He had been briefly engaged to a senator's daughter 2 years after Faith left, an arrangement pushed by the board. It ended quietly. Neither cared enough to fight for it. Since then, Lawrence never dated again. He worked endlessly, built his empire, and buried his emotions under deadlines and figures. Sometimes, though, when the silence became too heavy, he would open the drawer of his desk and take out a small photo. Faith on the beach in Calabar, her hair wind-blown, her smile wide, one hand reaching toward the camera. She looked alive, free, and he looked lost every time he saw it. A year after she disappeared, guilt consumed him. He tried to find her, hiring a private investigator, but every lead went cold. What he didn't know was that his mother had secretly shut down the search. The emails, the calls, the updates, all intercepted and erased. She had done it to protect the company's image, she said later. Lawrence had no idea, so he made peace with silence, or at least pretended to. He told himself she had moved on. He told himself it was his punishment for not fighting hard enough. But deep down, he never stopped wondering. That same night in Guaranpa, Faith closed the storybook. Ava and Leah were asleep, heads resting on her arms. She kissed their foreheads and whispered, "The end." In Maitama, Lawrence slid the photo back into the drawer and turned off the desk lamp. The city lights reflected in the glass wall before him. 2 lives, 1 truth, and fate, already turning, preparing to bring them face to face again. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the airport parking garage. Faith moved quickly, clutching her daughter's hands as she guided them toward the car. The air was thick with the hum of engines and the smell of rain on concrete. "Mummy, who was that man?" Ava asked quietly, glancing back. "Just someone I used to know," Faith murmured, her heartbeat racing as she fumbled for her car keys. Her voice trembled even though she tried to steady it. Then came a voice from behind her, low, strained, familiar. "Faith, wait." She froze. She knew that voice. She could never forget it, nor the owner, no matter how she tried. She just got back on a trip from Lagos with her kids after visiting family. Meeting Lawrence at the airport for the second time was not planned at all. "Lawrence," she said. He stepped closer, hands raised slightly, as though afraid she might run. His jacket hung open, his expression pale under the dim lights. "Are they mine?" he asked, his voice rough, almost breaking. Faith turned slowly, her eyes sharp and guarded. "Don't act like you don't know." Lawrence blinked, confused. "What?" "You saw me with them," she said bitterly. "And now you want to play innocent? You left, Lawrence. You disappeared. You married someone else within months? And now you want to ask that question?" "I didn't know," he said softly, shaking his head. "Faith, I swear, I didn't know." She gave a short, dry laugh. "I carried your children alone. I gave birth alone. Don't tell me you didn't know." "I didn't." His voice cracked, desperate. He took a slow step toward her. "I tried to find you. I searched, but you were gone." Her eyes narrowed. "You mean your mother made me disappear?" He flinched, and that told her everything. "I need to understand," he said quietly. "Please, Faith, just talk to me." Faith looked down at Ava and Leah. The girls stood still, their tiny hands clasped together, confusion clouding their faces. Then she looked back at Lawrence, the man who once knelt on a beach and promised her forever, the man she loved and hated in equal measure. "1 hour," she said finally. "There's a coffee shop near the gate." The coffee shop was almost empty, the air rich with the scent of roasted beans and the clinking of cups. Faith sat across from him, her arms folded tightly. Lawrence leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on her. "My father died right after I proposed to you," he began quietly. "A heart attack. No warning." Faith's gaze softened for a second, before hardening again. "I was pulled into the company overnight," Lawrence continued. "The board was panicking. Shares were dropping. My mother told me investors would pull out if I didn't change my image." "So cleaning up meant leaving me?" she asked, voice cold. "I didn't want to," he said. "But the pressure was crushing. My mom, the lawyers, they said being with you was a risk. No prenup, no influence, no status. They called it a liability." He exhaled sharply. "Then they offered me a deal. Marion's father agreed to invest if I agreed to the engagement." Faith stared at him. "And you said yes." "I tried to resist," he said. "I told them I needed time. Then, suddenly, you were gone." "I was gone?" she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Lawrence." "I called. I texted. I begged for answers. You never replied. I thought you were dead, or just didn't care." He shook his head, his voice cracking. "I never got your messages. My phone was replaced. My accounts were locked. They told me it was for security. I thought you'd left me." Faith's voice faltered. "I was pregnant." The words hit him like a blow. He froze, eyes wide. "I found out 2 weeks after you disappeared," she continued, her tone trembling but steady. "I had no job, no savings. I worked till my legs could barely carry me. I gave birth alone in a rundown clinic. I raised 2 girls while wondering why the man who loved me could leave without a word." Lawrence's eyes glistened. He didn't speak. "I hated you," she whispered. "At least, I thought I did." The silence between them stretched. Something fragile and painful hung in the air. Grief, regret, love that had never truly died. Neither of them spoke for a while. But in that silence, something changed. The anger softened, replaced by a quiet understanding. They had both been torn apart by things beyond their control. Both had believed lies. Both had suffered. And now, sitting across from each other again, eyes wet, hearts open, they finally saw the truth. Neither had stopped loving. They just hadn't been given the chance to stay. The sun dipped behind the Abuja skyline, casting a warm glow over the quiet street where Bloom and Canvas sat tucked between a small bakery and a stationery shop. Inside, the faint scent of lilies and eucalyptus floated through the air, blending with the sound of soft classical music from a nearby speaker. Faith stood behind the counter, tying a ribbon around a bouquet, but her mind wasn't on her work. Her eyes kept drifting to the window. Outside, leaning casually against a street pole, was Lawrence. His shirt sleeves were folded over his arm, phone in hand, pretending to scroll, but she knew he wasn't really reading anything. He had been doing this for days, sometimes early in the morning before work, sometimes in the evening before closing. He never entered unless invited. He never pushed. He just waited. Faith's hands trembled slightly as she trimmed the stem of a lily. She still didn't know what to do. He had told her he wanted to be part of Ava and Leah's lives, not to take them away, not to make a show of it, but because now that he knew, he couldn't walk away. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he had said softly a few days earlier, standing under the streetlight near her shop. Just a chance to earn trust, especially from them. She hadn't believed him. How could she? He had vanished without a word. No explanation. No closure. A part of her still loved him. Another part feared that letting him close again would break the peace she had fought so hard to build. Then, one afternoon, he did something she didn't expect. He showed up at the shop with a small brown box tied with string. When the twins opened it, their eyes lit up. Inside was a collection of hand-drawn storybooks, tales about animals and tiny robots learning to solve problems through kindness and creativity. Each book had watercolor illustrations and a handwritten note on the last page for curious minds who never stop asking questions. Lawrence had written and illustrated them himself. He introduced himself to the girls simply as Uncle Lawrence. No titles, no explanations. Ava, always the cautious one, asked rapid questions. "Are you a real engineer? Did you build robots? What's your favorite color?" Leah, quieter, simply climbed into his lap and pointed at a cat drawn beside a computer. "What's his name?" "That's Bite," Lawrence said, smiling. "He used to be my kitten." The girls giggled, their laughter filling the little shop. Faith stood by the doorway, watching. Something inside her shifted. An ache, a warmth, a longing she thought she'd buried. Days passed, and Lawrence kept returning. Sometimes he brought pastries from the bakery next door, sometimes another set of storybooks, sometimes nothing at all, just himself. He would let Leah braid his hair, while Ava quizzed him about circuits and colors. He never mentioned the past. He never pressed for answers. Faith told herself it was for the girls, that allowing him around was the right thing to do. But she couldn't ignore the way her daughters' faces lit up whenever they saw him through the window. The way Ava reached for his hand when crossing the road. The way Leah's laughter filled the air when he read them stories in silly voices. And then, one evening after closing, Faith looked out the window and saw his car still parked across the street. The lights were off, the engine silent. He was just sitting there. She stepped outside. "You're still here." He turned, startled but calm. "I like knowing they're safe," he said quietly. "Is that okay?" She crossed her arms. "This won't be easy, Lawrence. They've never had a father. If you disappear again—" "I won't," he said quickly. "You don't get to promise that," she replied sharply. "Not after last time." He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly. "Then don't believe my words," he said softly. "Watch what I do." Faith studied him closely. He wasn't the same man from 4 years ago, the polished executive in a perfect suit. This Lawrence looked older, humbler, and tired, but steadier. From the apartment window above them, Leah's tiny voice floated down. "Good night, Uncle Lawrence." They both looked up. Faith saw the way his entire face changed, the way light returned to his eyes at the sound of her daughter's voice. He didn't wave or speak. He just smiled and stayed still, his heart full. The first sign that something was wrong came with the flash of a camera. It was early morning, and Faith stepped out of the flower shop holding a box of fresh lilies when a burst of blinding light hit her face. She flinched, nearly dropping the box. Then came the voices. Fast, loud, and relentless. "Miss Raymond, is it true the twin girls are Lawrence Fidelis's children? Were you his secret lover while he was engaged to Marion Obeah? Do the girls know who their father is? Are you planning to sue for inheritance?" Faith froze. Her pulse spiked. She took a step back instinctively, shielding the box of flowers against her chest. The reporters pressed closer, their microphones thrust toward her face. Inside the shop, Ava and Leah were playing quietly in the corner, unaware of the chaos outside. Fear clenched Faith's heart, not for herself, but for them. Before she could respond, a black SUV screeched to a stop in front of the shop. The doors opened, and Lawrence stepped out. His expression was sharp, his face pale with fury. "Enough," he said, his voice low but firm. The reporters turned immediately, cameras flashing. "This is private property," he said through gritted teeth. "There are children inside. Leave now." "Mr. Fidelis," one reporter shouted over the others, "is it true? Are those girls your children?" Lawrence looked straight into the flashing lights and didn't blink. "Yes," he said clearly, "they are my daughters, and if you have any decency, you'll leave them alone." Faith froze, her lips parting in shock. He had just confirmed everything, publicly, in front of cameras, for the whole world to see. By noon, the video had gone viral across every major news outlet. Tech CEO Lawrence Fidelis admits to having twin daughters with former fiancé. Private love, public fallout. Lawrence Fidelis speaks out to protect his children. Calls poured in from business partners and board members. The company's stock began to dip. A major investor from Japan demanded a statement. By evening, Lawrence walked into the boardroom where his directors waited tensely. The head of finance spoke first. "Sir, the investors are threatening to withdraw their deal. The press is everywhere. You have to deny it. Or—" "No," Lawrence interrupted. His voice was calm but unyielding. "If signing that deal means denying my daughters exist, then the answer is no." The room fell silent. "We'll find another investor," he said as he stood, adjusting his coat. "But I only have one chance to be a real father." And with that, he walked out, leaving millions on the table but not a shred of doubt behind him. Later that evening, as Faith locked up the shop, she saw him standing by the doorway, not in a suit, not with his usual composure, just quiet, humble. "Can I talk to them?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then nodded. Inside, the twins were curled up on the couch with their picture books. When Lawrence entered, their faces lit up instantly. He knelt down in front of them, his hands trembling slightly. "I have something very important to tell you," he began, his voice gentle. Ava tilted her head. "Did we do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. He took a breath. I did. A long time ago. I made mistakes. I didn't know about you, but now I do. And I want to be here. Not sometimes. Always. The girls looked at each other, uncertain. I can't change the past, he continued, his voice breaking, but I can promise this. I'll never disappear again. Even if I'm busy, even if I'm far away, I'll always come back. He held out his hands, palms open. If you'll let me. Ava stepped forward first, slipping her small hand into his. Then Leah followed, wrapping both arms around his neck. Lawrence's eyes filled with tears as he pulled them close, holding them gently. Behind them, Faith covered her mouth, tears streaming silently down her face. She had dreamt of this moment once. 4 years ago, alone in a hospital bed, 2 newborns in her arms and a broken heart in her chest. She never thought it would come, but it had. Not Lawrence, the CEO. Not Lawrence, the man who left. Just Lawrence, the father of her children. And for the first time in years, she let herself hope again. The rain began as a whisper on the rooftops, soft and uncertain, before growing into a steady downpour that turned the streets of Abuja into glistening mirrors. In his office at Fidelis Innovations Tower, Lawrence stood before the wide glass window, staring blankly at the rain streaking down. The city lights blurred, and thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. His untouched cup of coffee sat cold on the desk beside his phone, which kept vibrating with calls. Investors, lawyers, board members. But he didn't reach for it. None of it mattered now. What mattered had walked out of his life again 4 days ago at the airport, and again yesterday when Faith left the shop early, her face unreadable, her voice low when she said, I just need time. He hadn't called her since. He couldn't. This time the choice was hers. All he could do was wait. A soft knock broke the silence. Faith stood in the doorway, rain-soaked, her hair clinging to her cheeks, her coat damp at the shoulders. Her umbrella hung useless in one hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Did you come to say goodbye? He asked finally, his voice rough and low. She didn't answer. She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her with a quiet click. Her gaze locked on his as she walked slowly toward him. I've had 4 years to hold on to my version of the story, she said softly. 4 years of believing you left me, that you stopped loving me, that I wasn't enough. Faith, Lawrence began, but she raised a hand gently. I was wrong. She took another step closer. You didn't leave me. You were forced to choose between what you loved and what the world demanded of you, and no one ever told you about your daughters. He looked at her, eyes glistening. Faith, if you still love me, she whispered, her voice trembling but sure, then you should know I never stopped. The words hit him like thunder. He closed the distance between them, and suddenly she was in his arms. The world outside blurred in streaks of rain as they held each other tightly, clinging as if afraid the moment might vanish. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair, for everything, for every moment I wasn't there. I know, she murmured against his chest. Me too. Neither of them noticed the glass doors open again behind them, nor the sound of tiny feet splashing through puddles across the marble floor. Mommy, Ava's voice rang out. Daddy, Leah added, breathless. They both turned just in time to catch their daughters running toward them, drenched from the rain, smiling so wide it hurt to look. Faith crouched down and gathered Ava in her arms while Lawrence scooped up Leah, who squealed with laughter. Did you follow us? He asked, half laughing through tears. Ava nodded proudly. We knew you were sad. And it's raining, Leah said, so we came to make it better. The 4 of them stood there, wet, laughing, crying, a tangle of arms, rain, and long-awaited love. A family, together at last. Later that night, the storm softened to a drizzle, tapping gently against the windows of Lawrence's penthouse. Inside, a small fire crackled in the living room. Lawrence sat cross-legged on the carpet, the twins curled up beside him, a storybook open in his lap. His voice was warm, animated, and filled with joy as he read, switching to silly voices that made the girls giggle uncontrollably. Faith stood in the doorway, watching them. The glow from the fire lit Lawrence's face, and in his eyes she saw something new. Peace, relief, maybe even healing. He looked up and met her gaze, his voice faltering for a second as a smile crossed his lips. She smiled back. In that silent exchange, past 1,000 words left unspoken, they both understood. Forgiveness didn't come from one apology. It came from showing up, staying, and choosing love again and again, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Faith stepped forward and closed the door behind her. She was home. The salty breeze drifted through the warm coastal air as waves lapped gently against the shore. On a quiet stretch of beach in Lagos, beneath a white arch draped with wildflowers and soft linen, Lawrence and Faith stood hand in hand, eyes locked, hearts full. Faith's dress was light and flowing, the lace along her sleeves catching the sunlight as the wind lifted her soft hair. Tiny daisies pinned into her hair glowed like scattered stars. Lawrence couldn't look away. "You're glowing," he whispered. She smiled, eyes shining. "That's because I'm marrying you." Behind them, Ava and Leah stood in matching white dresses, holding tiny bouquets of lavender and baby's breath. Their smiles were wide, their excitement uncontainable. "You two look like little angels," Faith said softly. Ava grinned. "We are angels. Daddy said so." Leah giggled. "And it's true." A gentle wave of laughter rippled through the small group of family and close friends gathered to witness the moment. There were no flashing cameras, no press, no crowd, just the sea, the sand, and the quiet joy of a love restored. When the officiant signaled, Lawrence turned fully toward Faith, his hands holding hers firmly. "You and the girls," he began, voice steady but thick with emotion. "You're the reason I got a second chance at life. You're the reason I came home. I vow never to let fear or duty take that from me again. I vow to choose you, every day, always. You and our two bright lights who call me Dad." Faith's eyes glistened as tears slipped down her cheeks. She took a deep breath. "Love doesn't disappear," she said softly. "It waits. Sometimes it hides under pain, under time, under loss, but it never dies. Lawrence, you were always the right one. I choose you again, not just for what we lost, but for everything ahead." Their hands tightened, their foreheads touched, and when they kissed, the waves crashed loudly against the rocks, as if the sea itself rejoiced. Ava and Leah squealed, tossing petals into the air as laughter rose all around them. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, the family sat together by a small fire pit near their beach cottage. The sky blazed in orange and gold as the waves whispered softly behind them. Lawrence crouched beside the fire, carefully roasting suya with exaggerated seriousness, while the girls tried not to burn theirs, failing gloriously each time. Faith sat on a driftwood log wrapped in a blanket, her sketchbook open on her lap, a peaceful smile on her face. "Mummy," Ava said, tugging at her sleeve, "we finished it." She and Leah held up a crayon drawing, 4 stick figures holding hands under a starry sky, a campfire in the middle, the sea behind them. Above it, written in bold colors, were the words, "Our family forever." Faith blinked hard, her voice catching. "You made this?" "We drew it together," Leah said proudly. "It's us." Lawrence joined them, handing out perfectly cooked suya, then sat beside Faith, wrapping one arm around her waist. She leaned into him, and the blanket covered them both. The fire crackled softly, the waves hummed in the distance, and the twins' laughter filled the air. Lawrence turned slightly, his voice a whisper against the sound of the sea. "Thank you." Faith looked up at him. "For what?" "For letting me come back." She smiled, her hand resting over his. "You never really left. You just lost your way." He leaned closer, and she kissed him, slow, sure, and tender, under the vast night sky. If a camera had captured it, the frame would pull back to reveal the four of them glowing in the golden light of the fire, the sea shimmering behind, the stars scattered above, and something even brighter between them. It wasn't the life they had planned. It was the one they had chosen, together. And for the first time in years, everything felt exactly as it should be. Thank you for joining this journey of love, loss, and rediscovery. If Lawrence and Faith's story touched your heart, if it reminded you that some separations are not endings but redirections, then hold this truth close. Love that is real doesn't fade. It waits. It grows quietly until the right time calls it home. Their story is not just about finding each other again. It's about forgiveness, second chances, and the kind of love that fights through silence, distance, and misunderstanding to stand firm in the end. If this story made you believe again, in lasting love, in family, and in hope that outlives pain, then keep following tales like this. Subscribe and turn your notifications bell for more stories like this.